Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Seth.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. You know what it is, Seth?
Sunday.
No, it's a hot one.
Oh. Is he going to call Sears?
I'll call now.
I hope that everybody listening to this episode, if Zach leaves this bit in, remembers a Sears commercial where they complained about it being another scorcher.
Gonna be another scorcher.
And I felt like that commercial played a lot when it aired.
It did. It's one of those commercials where it would play, because I think it probably started airing in the 90s, but it would play into the 2000s. So you were like, wow, this commercial feels like it's from the 90s.
Someone wrote a nice article about the You'll Call Now, the making and meaning of the Sears air conditioning commercial that will never die.
I'll drop in the commercial. It's like a 30-second long.
I cannot live another day without air conditioning.
Says tomorrow's gonna be hotter.
Hotter?
Like yesterday.
Yesterday you said you'd call Sears.
I'll call today.
You call now.
I'll call now.
Or at least the segment that's most important is 30-second long, because I'm pretty sure the rest of the segment is just them doing the spiel.
Some orchestral music, and then...
Yeah. Well, it's like the narrator being like, call 1-800.
Yeah, it's because that's when Sears installed air conditioners, which they don't do much of that. I don't think... They don't do much of anything right now.
Pretty sure they're defunct.
They're not like Woolworths, though.
Sears has currently 5 known locations in the United States. At its height, it had over 3,000 locations.
They were a Fortune 10 company at one point in time. They were one of the biggest companies in retail. A CEO of the company I work at used to use them as an example of what happens when you think that you're too big to fail.
Sears is currently owned by Transform Co., who are referred to as New Sears.
They merged with Kmart, became Sears Holdings, and then Sears Holdings filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and then those assets were purchased by Transform Co., New Sears, and now they just, whatever they're doing with them, some VC tear up of assets. But yeah, the sad end of Sears.
It looks like all they're doing now is closing stores and selling off brands. They sold off Die Hard to Advanced Auto Parts.
Yeah,
because that used to be a Sears brand.
And Black & Decker. They sold off
Black & Decker, yeah,
to Stanley Works, I think.
And today's episode is going to be all about Sears and Kmart. Everything you loved about those stores. We could probably do like an episode about Kmart. I don't think they had any video games, but
they sold a lot. They were a video game retailer.
Sears had a brand, like a video game line of brand. We talked about doing a Sears episode.
Yeah, we could do retailers that used to sell video games but don't.
Yes, but that's not today's episode.
It's just hot out.
I'll call now. Anyway, Seth, what have you been recently playing?
So recently I've been playing the demo for Turbo Overkill, which was released in August of 2023. The developer is Trigger Happy Interactive, and it was published by Apogee Entertainment. You enter a area, city, world called Paradise, and you're Johnny Turbo.
Johnny Turbo.
You are half metal, half man, all murder machine.
Nice.
And you have to clean up all the streets with your weapons, which you have dual pistols. You can collect additional weapons like shotguns, but one of the major things that you have is a chainsaw leg. And so one of your legs is just a chainsaw. And so you can do a sliding maneuver, and you use your chainsaw, and you run into bad guys with it. And the faster you go, the more enemies you can kill. You can get up to eventually 15 weapons. You also get a hover car, and you are fighting these guys that kind of look like humans, but they have TVs for heads and they have syringes for hands. It's a very fast-paced FPS. I would say like a boomer shooter.
Yeah, I would call it a boomer shooter. Yeah.
A little bit more extreme from like the usual boomer shooters. And it's got cool, like the weapons have alt fire. It is a little jittery for me. The character has just like this pacing where it's kind of like you're like skipping frames as you move forward, which is a little annoying, but you can do a little bit of double jumping. The alternate fires on the weapons are pretty cool. The dual pistols, you spin one pistol in your hand and you charge up another pistol and like lock on to a target. one of the shotguns, you can like triple charge it to make a blast. It's like a grenade. There are some pickup weapons that only are around for a limited amount of time because based on the ammunition, there's no reloading them, which like for the one that I picked up for that was dual Uzis. It's a fun, fast-paced shooter, turbo overkill. They have cool like Apogee references throughout it too because they were published, so there's like an arcade that has some Apogee games on it. But yeah, so it's a cool game. There's a demo on Steam that you can play to see if it's up your alley.
It's also on sale right now. It's Cyberpunk Fest, which we timed this perfectly for this episode.
We did. Is it still going to be going on when this episode comes out?
It is. It goes on until August 10th.
Nice. Look at that. Cyberpunk Fest and a Cyberpunk episode.
But before we talk about today's episode, the game I've been recently playing is more Bolt Gun, Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. I've been playing Forges of Corruption, the DLC. I beat Bolt Gun recently. Cue the Zach Beats a Game song. So I've been playing the DLC now, and it's more of the same. I mean, it doesn't really change up the dynamic of the game that much. It is more violence, more being the Ultramarine that you are. It does feature new weapons. There's a new multi-melta rifle that you can use, which has 2 barrels and does, as you can imagine, double the amount of damage you would expect from a melta rifle. There's also a really powerful rocket launcher that kind of launches, I want to call them mini nukes, because when you launch them and they explode, they put out a little mushroom cloud. You also go against some new enemies. There's Chaos Marines that have rocket launchers. There are Chaos Terminators that have electrical gauntlets and they charge at you. But really, it is just Bolt Gun continued. It is same Bolt Gun, same bolt place. Yeah, it's been a fun time. I've been playing it primarily on my Steam Deck. I tend to have trouble with first-person shooters on the Steam Deck. I don't know what it is, but sometimes it just slightly like discombobulates me, and Bolt Gun runs really well and does not discombobulate me. So I've been able to just like lie back on the couch watching TV and having Bolt Gun in my hands and just enjoying a good time. That's Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun Forges of Corruption.
How does it compare against Space Marines 2?
It's like apples and oranges, in my opinion. I mean, I think Bolt Gun as a whole is a very different type of game than Space Marine 2. As we've discussed, I think Warhammer's lore is always very silly. But I think Space Marine 2 at least tries to take itself a little seriously.
Space Marines 2 takes itself seriously?
Tries to, a little bit.
Oh, tries to. And Bolt Gun, no?
Bolt Gun, there is no seriousness, I feel like.
What about Bolt Gun versus Deathwing?
Oh, Bolt Gun is definitely more over the top. Deathwing takes itself the most serious. It is the least amount of silly things.
Deathwing's the seriousest, and then followed by Space Marines 2. But like is the action more akin to Deathwing, or is it more akin to Space Marines?
I mean, probably it's more akin to Turbo Overkill. Like people are exploding into millions of pieces.
It's definitely more of like a boomer shooter, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. And Space Marine 2, I think, does a good job at balancing out your combat that you are doing with your partner. So when you're playing co-op with someone else, it does a good job at balancing the difficulty. With Bolt Gun, it is you against the world, and they make the enemies easy to pop. Is what I've noticed.
That's fair.
So when you shoot a Nurgling, it just explodes. But I like Forges of Corruption. It's a good DLC. I'm looking forward to picking up Bolt Gun 2 when it comes out. I think it's due out the end of this year. But in any case, getting into today's episode, we are actually taking a listener suggestion from Classic Dad, who asked us if there are any Blade Runner games, and there are. There's in fact 2 Blade Runner games, and that gives us plenty to work with for a Classic Gaming Brothers episode. To get into the history of Blade Runner, I first want to talk about my memories of Blade Runner. I remember watching Blade Runner. I watched the director's cut with my dad. My dad put it on for me one day, I think when I was staying over his place, and I really liked it. And I didn't know so much about the history beyond, I think, what my dad had told me. Our father is a big sci-fi fan, so he, of course, told me, it's based on a book by Philip K. Dick, and told me that the director's cut at the time, which was, I think, the version that was considered the better version available, that the director's cut was very different than the theatrical cut. So those were the 2 things I knew. I'm very familiar with Blade Runner, at least from watching it on that director's cut DVD copy, and I really liked it. I liked the world, I liked the aesthetic, I liked the pacing of Blade Runner, which gets a lot of criticism from people even today, but I really did enjoy a lot about Blade Runner that makes it what it is. But Seth, what about you? Do you have any thoughts or feelings about Blade Runner?
I never really got into Blade Runner. Dad didn't make me sit down and watch it. I'm aware of Blade Runner.
Have you seen it?
No. He fights vampires?
No, that's Blade.
Oh, that's Blade. Blade
Runner. It's a cyberpunk,
Yeah.
and he is hunting replicants.
Oh, okay. So robots.
Replicants.
Yeah. So he's hunting replicants. I get Blade Runner, Blade, and another type of runner thing all confused in my head.
That's fair.
But I'm familiar with the cyberpunk genre, mostly through Cyberpunk, and I know that it takes some of its inspiration from Blade Runner.
Absolutely. Like the design of the cities in Cyberpunk, the flying cars that you sometimes see in Cyberpunk, those are all just straight out of Blade Runner.
Because Blade Runner came first, even though Cyberpunk is an older game. Not the video game, the tabletop.
Cyberpunk, the game, I think we mention it later. I think it only came out like 4 or 5 years after the movie of Blade Runner. So they came out very close to each other, but Blade Runner obviously was first. But getting into the history of Blade Runner, born in 1928 in Chicago, Philip K. Dick would travel a lot in his early life. He spent a few years in San Francisco, then to Reno, then to DC, and then to Berkeley, California, where he would attend Berkeley High School. And at Berkeley High School, he was actually a classmate of Ursula K. Le Guin, another fantasy sci-fi writer, though they didn't know each other. They never met. But it is just a fun coincidence that these two incredibly prominent, important figures in science fiction went to the same high school at the same time. Throughout his life, he grew up reading science fiction in different sci-fi magazines, such as Stirring Science Stories, though he often didn't get the best grades in his writing class, though teachers at the time would say that he is a very creative student. He briefly attended the University of California, Berkeley, but dropped out before declaring a major, largely due to some anxiety issues that he suffered from, and also reportedly from one of his, I believe, ex-wives. He had a lack of interest in the mandatory ROTC training courses. He would grow to have an interest, despite leaving school, in learning. He developed an interest in philosophy and began to see himself as what he called a cosmic panentheist, in that he believed that the universe did not exist. The universe itself did not exist, and it was just an extension of God. He would also come to believe that the world did not exist. It was just a further extension of God. And he firmly believed that this was something that no one can prove that the world existed. He had a very metaphysical belief system, and this belief system began to creep its way into his creative writing, a hobby that he picked up. In his early 20s, he started selling stories to various science fiction publications like Planet Stories, Galaxy, If, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and so on and so on. A lot of pulp mags that you can probably find at the thrift store for $1 or $2. In 1955, he published his debut novel, Solar Lottery, which would appear in an Ace double publication along The Big Jump by Leigh Brackett. And for those who don't know what an Ace double publication is, it is 2 books in one. It's exactly what it sounds like. On one side, it's one book, and when you flip it over, it's another book. And it is the cheapest of the cheap in terms of publications from that era.
He continued writing, though often struggled to make ends meet. While he was popular in the science fiction world, his books never quite made it to mainstream success and could only really publish books through publishers like Ace, who historically didn't pay their writers well. Ace is still publishing today, and they recently are the publishers for Dungeon Crawl Carl.
Oh, that's fun. I hope they pay their writers well now.
Yes, I think Matt's getting taken care of. Philip K. Dick would go on to win a Hugo Award in 1963 for his book The Man in the High Castle, which has since been adapted into a successful Amazon show, albeit a little slow. But I think a lot of Philip K. Dick stuff is slow. I really like the premises of Philip K. Dick. Like, I look at the stuff that he writes or like has inspiration based on it, like Man in the High Castle. I'm like, that's really cool. That's gonna be my jam. I put that on, and it is snooze fest for me.
Yeah, it's very high-handed drama is what I see it as. Like, it's very he has these great concepts, but at least in the adaptations, it's like a lot of people talking.
Yeah, I don't know if he did. I know he didn't do anything with Westworld, but Westworld also kind of like I think I fell asleep during every single episode that we tried to watch it, and I wanted to watch it, and my wife watched the whole series. Through the 1960s, Dick would continue to publish novels such as The Zap Gun, The Simulacra, The Crack of the Space, and The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch. In 1968, he published Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which would go on to earn him the Nebula Award that year. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is a dystopian novel set in the post-apocalyptic San Francisco. It follows Rick Deckard, a bounty hunter hired to retire 6 androids. I'm assuming that retires at the end of a muzzle. The novel was intentionally written to mirror the style of noir stories, with Deckard being portrayed similar to a private detective in film noir movies popular in the 1950s, where he's often callous and indifferent to the world they live in. The book would retroactively be labeled as cyberpunk, a term often used to describe a genre of fiction set in a highly technological setting, but often from the viewpoint of people who are often lower on the social totem pole or who are really suffering through the time of the punking.
Yes, it is described as, I think some people call it low life, high technology.
Yes, everything went bad and only the few have a lot of wealth, and there is a lot of technology available, but it doesn't lift up everybody. Kind of like today.
Yes.
The novel would be adapted in 1982 by director Ridley Scott as the film Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford as Deckard. The story of the movie follows the overall plot, with some significant changes made to the overall themes and aesthetic of the world. While the dystopian environment was kept, the movie introduced terminology that wasn't in the book, such as androids being referred to as replicants and bounty hunters being called Blade Runners.
Much of the design of the film was inspired by the worlds of Jean Girard, aka Mobius, who was a contributor to the magazine Metal Hurlant, which Ridley Scott was familiar with and a fan of. Scott was also reportedly inspired by the painting Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. Nighthawks is a really well-known painting. It is a picture of a diner taken at a street corner, and there are 4 people in the diner. One man has his back to the window. There's a guy with a hat sitting next to a girl in a red dress and a person behind the counter. You've probably seen Nighthawks before. It is a very well-known painting, I would say. It's I always forget the name of it, but the moment I see it, I'm like, yes, I've seen this painting before. And it's an image that's often been parodied in things like The Simpsons. Sometimes TV shows will use kind of that frame of the diner and the people in the diner from the outside as an establishing shot. Often, almost always, in reference to Nighthawks. Ridley Scott was also inspired by the real-life city of Hong Kong, which at the time had a very cyberpunk aesthetic to it, especially Kowloon City, which was a part of Hong Kong, which was like a hyper-condensed, like, couple of blocks that were just like large towers and like narrow alleyways, and were a bit of a disaster. And he was also inspired by the industrial areas of northeast England. Another massive influence was Fritz Lang's Metropolis from 1927. In fact, special effects supervisor Dave Dreyer would use stills from Metropolis to help line up his miniatures for the shots of Blade Runner. So if you're ever watching Blade Runner and you're familiar with Metropolis and you're like, hey, this shot looks very similar to one from Metropolis, that's why. The initial script was optioned by Hampton Fancher, with the name Blade Runner coming from a treatment for a film based on the Alan E. Nourse novel, The Blade Runner. Producer Michael Dealey was able to secure the rights to the title after Ridley Scott mentioned how much he liked the title. The script by Fancher was actually disliked by Philip K. Dick, who felt it was quote-unquote terrible and quote-unquote corny. Much of the script would be reworked by David Peoples, which Dick ended up preferring the rework. However, some of the most noteworthy lines of dialogue didn't come from the script necessarily, it came from the actors. One of the most famous lines in Blade Runner is Rutger Hauer's Tears in the Rain speech that he gives, which was actually rewritten from the original script by Rutger Hauer himself. He rewrote much of the line and then gave it to Ridley Scott and said, hey, can I say it like this? And Ridley Scott was like, yeah, absolutely. And that's how it's delivered. And I'll drop in the Tears in the Rain speech. It's pretty short.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain. Time to die.
The film was a massive undertaking, costing around $30 million at the time, which is close to about $90 million today. It was plagued with production issues such as Harrison Ford often getting into arguments with Ridley Scott. The relationship between the filmmakers and the investors was incredibly tumultuous. Ridley Scott was actually fired at one point, with Bud Yorkin and Jerry Parenchio taking over production for a bit. And one of the biggest points of contention was that money thing. Surprisingly, money is important when you're making a movie. And the film was also largely over budget. It was also heavily cut during its initial release. There was some test audiences who didn't really like the ending, so the ending was changed to be much more happy. Also, test audiences reportedly had trouble following the movie, so the producers made the executive decision to add a voiceover narration from Harrison Ford throughout the film. Harrison Ford hates doing voiceovers and thought it was bad, so he gives the most half-assed performance of his life in this voiceover. There are a ton of cuts of the film that are available to watch, though. It's widely accepted the best version is the 2007 final cut, which removes the voiceover, removes the happy ending, and inserts various scenes that were cut from the theatrical version.
When the film did have its time in the theaters, it would be a box office bomb. A variety of reasons likely impacted the film's performance, but most blame the fact that there are 4 other science fiction films were released that same year, including The Thing, Conan the Barbarian, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and of course, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which would go on to be not a box office bomb. Initial critics were rough on the film, with it having a mixed reception. Most of the criticism was lobbed at the pace of the film, with Los Angeles Times calling it Blade Crawler. Despite the criticism, the film currently holds an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes and is regarded as a masterpiece of science fiction cinema. Now, we are a classic gaming podcast, so we should probably talk about classic games. So what about those games? Well, there are 2. The first would be Blade Runner, which was released in 1985, developed by Andy Stoddard and Ian Foster, and published by CRL Group PLC. The game is a shoot-'em-up where you run around killing replicadroids, not replicants, and you're doing that for money. The game is interesting in the fact that it's not officially licensed as a movie adaptation. The publisher was actually unable to obtain any rights for the movie, so they decided to claim the game is just based on the soundtrack.
Apparently, in the manual, it says based on the soundtrack for the film Blade Runner.
And they call it Blade Runner, though.
Yes.
Which I guess you would not get this game confused with the movie Blade Runner. So I guess it's no copyright issue. The game was released on the ZX Spectrum, C64, and Amstrad CPC, and got mostly bad reviews. While your Sinclair would rate it a 7 out of 10, Crash would go on and give it a 58%, and Zap! 64 would give it a 39%. Critics panned the game as being bland and repetitive. In a review from Sinclair User, it mentioned you'll get an irresistible urge to smash your Spectrum.
Next up would be another game, also called Blade Runner.
Hopefully with the license.
Funny story. So developed by Westwood Studios and published by Virgin Interactive, Blade Runner had a very interesting history in terms of its development. The plan for the game came about when a group called Blade Runner Partnership approached Electronic Arts, then Sierra, then Activision, and then Virgin, with the idea of making a game based on the movie Blade Runner. All of them pretty much said no, except for Virgin, who would take on the task, but there was one major issue. Those darn movie rights. The problem wasn't necessarily getting them. It was who had them. Because North American distribution was owned by the Ladd Company, international distribution was by Run Run Shaw, and ancillary rights were owned by the Blade Runner Partnership. Virgin began to sort out all these legal headaches of figuring out who and what so and where to get them, and eventually did get the game ready with a contract signed off, and they would hire on Westwood Studios to get work done on the game. But the rights issues didn't necessarily end, because yes, they got the rights squared away. That was all set. But another legal snafu hit them when it was revealed that a lot of the production legal paperwork, such as like the crew and the cast members' contracts, had gone missing because they likely threw them out. A lot of the production of Blade Runner was tumultuous. A lot of people left that film with some bad taste in their mouth, and ditched anything they had related to that movie. And the studio didn't have a good time making that movie, so they probably got rid of a bunch of stuff. Ridley Scott didn't have a good time making it, got rid of a bunch of stuff. So the problem was, yes, they had the rights to the movie, but they didn't necessarily have the rights to the people in the movie. As such, the studio technically had no legal way of using footage or audio of characters because they had no way to know if they had the right to do so. So imagine this. They use a scene where they got permission from Harrison Ford and maybe Sean Young, and they were able to get a permission from those two. But there's a third guy in the background who's just some random background character who they might not have the right to use that guy's image. So they were like, literally anyone could come out of this movie with this game coming out and say, you don't have the right to make this game. Lewis Castle, the game's producer, came up with a solution, which I think was the best solution for everyone. Basically, they weren't going to adapt Blade Runner. They were going to make a game set in the same world as Blade Runner, or as people would later call it, a sidequill. Lewis Castle pitched the idea to Virgin, and they were on board. They thought this was a great idea, saved them a headache. So Virgin was like, yeah, absolutely, great idea. But you gotta still ask the Blade Runner partnership if that's okay. So Castle would then pitch the idea to Bud Yorkin, one of the Blade Runner partnership folk, and Bud loved the idea. And the reason Bud loved the idea is because Lewis went to the effort of putting together a cutscene for the game's opening that utilized the aesthetic of Blade Runner, but none of the footage. And Bud was just really excited about this. He thought this was great, and he was like, absolutely. Apparently going into the meeting, Bud was incredibly nervous about how they were going to solve this footage issue. He was like, how can we make a game without any footage from the movie about the game? And when he saw the footage that Lewis Castle put together, he was like, oh, issue solved. So they had the idea, they had the plan, they had one rule: no footage could be used.
However, character likenesses were allowed, but it was decided to not utilize the character of Deckard and instead focus on a new character named Ray McCoy. The rest of the characters would be new additions, though a few of the original cast members reprised their roles, specifically Sean Young as Rachel, James Hong as Hannibal Chu, Joe Turkel as Dr. Tyrell, William Sanderson as JF Sebastian, and Brian James as Leon. There was discussion to add Harrison Ford as Deckard as a cameo appearance, but Ford did not return their requests. Another rule to the game's development was making sure that it didn't alter or contradict any moments from the film. The game would be developed fully in 3D with pre-rendered backgrounds and 3D models. The game engine would utilize voxels, which meant that the 3D accelerators couldn't be used due to the fact that there would be too many polygons to render. The game would feature around 140 locations to visit, which also meant that the graphics card at the time would have struggled. Voxels allowed the game to be rendered without issue, while also keeping the game at a high frame rate. On most systems, the game typically ran at about 15 frames per second.
Which back in I will say, that doesn't sound like a lot, but back in 1997 for a 3D game on the PC, that's not terrible.
And the CRT hit a lot of errors. And,
yeah, that's true.
The game's animation is motion captured. At the time, a typical game would have likely had a good 100 motion capture sequences. Games considered advanced may have pushed that number to around 1,000. Blade Runner had 20,000 motion capture sequences. Is there FMV in the game? Is it all FMV?
No, it's just motion capture 3D models.
Motion capture 3D models, like
yes.
Oh, it kind of reminds me of the Indigo Prophecy.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
It's like the background is static, but the characters in it are 3D sprites.
Yeah, 3D sprites that have some really nice texturing on them to make them look almost like photorealistic, but they're 3D.
And it doesn't need to run at a high frames per second either, because the backgrounds are going to be mostly static.
The game itself is a point-and-click adventure game played from a third-person perspective. You utilize a mouse to explore and traverse the world. The main point of the game is that you're working as a detective. You look for clues, conduct interviews, or analyze photographs. There's actually a really interesting element of randomization in the game. For example, you're given 15 suspects. Only 2 of the suspects are always going to be replicants, no matter what. But the rest are randomized, and you are required to do detective work and interview each suspect, and they have different lines depending on if they are a replicant or not, and you have to determine who is the replicant. As such, a playthrough of the game for one player is different for another player, which was the intention of developing it. They wanted it to feel different. It also means a walkthrough of the game is not easy to find, because it's never necessarily the same. The plot of the game follows Ray McCoy, a rookie Blade Runner, who is tasked with hunting down a group of replicants that are accused of murdering animals. In the Blade Runner universe, murdering animals is a worse crime than murdering humans. The reason being is that in the Blade Runner universe, there are far more humans than there are animals. In fact, animals are pretty much like a majority of animals, arguably, almost like all animals are basically nearly extinct. So animals are heavily protected, and it's very rare to even see an animal in your lifetime. So So murdering animals is considered the highest of crimes, and it is not good. And replicants doing it is even worse. McCoy ends up getting framed for murder, and he is framed by a Lieutenant Guzza, who has been secretly assisting replicants. McCoy makes his way through LA, trying to sort everything out, figuring out how to clear his name, etc., etc. Usual noir kind of storytelling. The game features 13 different endings, with each being influenced by your actions and decisions. Again, pretty cool for 1997, having that many endings for a game. On release, Blade Runner scored very well. Adventure Gamers gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Game Revolution gave it an A-, and RPG Fan gave it a 93%. It also sold pretty well. By November of 1997, it had sold over 15,000 copies. By July of 1998, it sold an additional 47,939 copies, and by 2006, it's estimated that it sold upward to over 1 million. Lewis Castle claims it outsold The Curse of Monkey Island 3-1. Don't know if that's true, or if he was just selling his game, but that's pretty cool if it did. The game has since been re-released on GOG. It was re-released in its standard edition back in 2019, and then there was an enhanced version released by Night Dive Studios back in 2022. The enhanced version was negatively received at first, but there was a major patch they did that fixed pretty much all the issues, and it has mostly positive reviews now on Steam. So I think that is the version to get. Though if you're a purist, I'm sure you can hunt down the original CD-ROM somewhere.
I might actually look to get it. It sounds like a game that I would actually have fun playing.
I think you would like it a lot based on the style.
The games that I play, yeah. And the years since the movie Blade Runner has become a massive influence of the cyberpunk genre. The movie would spawn a series of sequel books, specifically Blade Runner 2, The Edge of Human, Blade Runner 3, Replicant Night, and Blade Runner 4, Iron Talon, all written by K.W. Jeter. The film also had an official sequel titled Blade Runner 2049, which was released in 2017. Did that one perform okay, or was that also a box office bomb?
It did pretty decently. So it's had a budget of 185 million, made back 276 million.
Okay, so it did all right.
Yes, it wasn't a major...
Yeah, you weren't making immediate sequels. Though another sequel, a television series titled Blade Runner 2099, is confirmed for release in November 2026 on Amazon Prime. The movie has also heavily influenced different video games, such as Snatcher, developed by Hideo Kojima, which follows an investigation into a group of robot humanoids that are replacing people. The movie also influenced the 1988 tabletop role-playing game Cyberpunk, which would go on to inspire the video game Cyberpunk 2077. And also I feel like games like Detroit Become Human.
Yeah, even Shadowrun. There's tons. I could probably go through my list of games and just pull out random ones that were inspired in some way by Blade Runner. It's just that it's a very distinct aesthetic, cyberpunk. And I think cyberpunk owes a lot to the aesthetic that the Blade Runner movie had to offer. And arguably, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was very inspirational to the genre of cyberpunk, as it deals a lot with, cybernetics and android rights and stuff like that. Stuff that becomes a bit more, I think, commonplace in cyberpunk stories. I think all of those are topics that actually pop up in Cyberpunk 2077. But it is interesting to see kind of the line go from Philip K. Dick's original novel into this really whole different world, probably from what he initially imagined.
It's a fun genre. I think it always is a niche genre, right? You get your sci-fi people who love sci-fi. You get your fantasy people who love fantasy. Those genres are these big, massive genres that can cross geekdoms. It can cross, it can get to normality when you go to a barber shop, hairdresser, salon, and women over the age of 70 are all talking about Game of Thrones. That's the power of some of these fantasy genres. Cyberpunk's not there, right? Cyberpunk did get a huge boost with Cyberpunk 2077, which I think exposed a lot of people to the cyberpunk genre. But it is always one of those genres that's just also there. I would say the same vein that Fallout, with that post-apocalyptic genre is. That genre is much bigger than Fallout. Fallout's just kind of the big boy of the genre in town. And I think the TV show has been doing good for the Fallout, and I think a Blade Runner TV show could be good for the cyberpunk genre, as well as additional Cyberpunk 2077 video games.
That being said, we're going to get into our retro rewind. So Seth had me play Corridor 7 Alien Invasion Invasion for MS-DOS. Released in 1994 and developed by Capstone Software, Corridor 7 Alien Invasion is an interesting game. It uses the Wolfenstein engine. It's actually a game that we talked about way back in our Doom Clones episode, back in episode 228. Corridor 7 Alien Invasion, I did replay it for this Retro Rewind. It's just not a very good game. It plays relatively smoothly, I will give it, largely due to the fact that it's using an engine that has been time-tested and approved, but the game is just an overall slog everywhere else. Enemies pop up behind you without notice and will quickly drain your health without you really realizing. The levels are all muddy looking. The graphics are kind of gross. It does not hold up. I don't think so. I mean, I own a copy of it on Steam, but I largely bought the copy as like a joke to myself, so I could be like, I'm going to play Corridor 7 Alien Invasion. I think it's kind of a meme in the boomer shooter community because of what it is, though no, it doesn't hold up. Next week, Seth, you can play Robo Trek for the Super Nintendo.
Great. Zach had me play the Chaos Engine, also known as Soldiers of Fortune in the US. It was released in 1993 for the Amiga and eventually was ported to MS-DOS, SNES, Atari ST, Amiga CD332, the RISC operating system, and the Mega Drive. Developed by Bitmap Brothers and published by Renegade Software. There are 6 characters that you can play as. There's Navi and the Thug, who are slow, destructive characters. Navi uses a bazooka, and Thug uses a shotgun. Then there's Brigand and Mercenary. They're kind of the middling characters. One uses a rifle, and the other uses a Gatling gun. And finally, there's the Gentleman and the Preacher, or the Scientist, depending on whether or not you're playing it on SNES and Mega Drive. The Gentleman uses a flame pistol, and the character that's the Preacher uses a lightning gun. However, on the SNES and Mega Drive, they made the Preacher a scientist because they didn't think that there should be a preacher killing other people. But
they would have hated Father Grigori.
They would have hated Father. I love Father Grigori. It is an 8-way top-down shooter game and is pretty standard when it comes to this type of genre, where you kind of must battle through the creations of chaos across 4 different areas. The unique thing about the Chaos Engine is that you always have 2 people that you play as, with the AI controlling the second character, and you can eventually be able to switch between them. You can also have a second player play the second character, because no one should face chaos alone. The gameplay is pretty well. It has solid controls and is ultimately a fun top-down shooter game. It has a special place in our hearts because we owned the game on PC, which was called the Chaos Engine. It was not one of the versions that was changed to the Soldiers of Fortune, and we never were able to play it. It wouldn't install or boot or do something. We could never get into the game. So we had a lot of high hopes that we wanted, that we put upon this game because it looked really cool. I think Zach still has the discs floating around, or our dad has the disc floating around. But let me tell you, I'm playing it after I think I played it the first time after 10 years after owning it or something like that, in college, and it was pretty disappointing. It was a game because it had such a big hype behind it. But if you weren't hyped up to play this game, I think you'll be okay if you want to play a top-down shooter. It's fun. It holds up. It's a solid game, maintains gameplay and all that jazz. Next week, Zach, you can play the Chaos Engine, the sequel, too.
For what?
I think for Mega Drive.
Okay, I will. With that, I want to thank everyone for listening to today's episode. If you have any memories or thoughts about Blade Runner, be sure to let us know. You can do so by emailing us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on social media. Look us up, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. We're also available on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We're available on Patreon. Be sure to support us if you can. And we're also available at our website, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
Right.